Welcome, Professor. Let me quickly run through your biography before we start your session. So Professor David Lopez Carr is a professor of geography at the University of California, Santa Barbara, where he directs the Human Environment Dynamics Lab. And Professor Lopez received a PhD in geography from the University of North Carolina in 2002, where he subsequently held a 2-year NIH postdoctoral fellowship in biostatistics in the School of Public Health and Carolina Population Center. He has lived, worked, and traveled in over 70 countries worldwide and speaks Spanish, Portuguese, Italian, French, and Rudimentar Kretschmeier. His research specifically focuses on links among population health, rural development, agriculture, marine and forest resources use, as well as conservation through ongoing projects in Latin America, Africa, and Asia. He has authored nearly 200 scientific publications. His scholarship has been conducted with colleagues and students from over 50 fellowships. Among his awards in 2022, he was presented the Association of American Geographers and also the Susan Hardwick Excellence in Mentoring Award. And in 2014, he was elected an American Association of the Advancement of Science Fellow for distinguished contribution in the field of geography, particularly for the advancing our scientific understanding of the coupled process of human population dynamics and environmental change. Professor Lopez Carr will be speaking on population land change dynamics. Professor Lopez Carr, that's an impressive biography, and we're pleased to have you. You can start the presentation. Thank you.
Well, thank you so much, Arigenewa, for that lovely presentation introduction. And good afternoon to all of you. Good morning here. It's 6:30 in the morning, and I'm here with my coffee and really grateful to have been invited and to be able to join you here. Would you like me to share my screen? Okay, so again, I'm very grateful to be invited to this important symposium, and I'd like to talk very briefly, as I know we have many speakers, about population and land change dynamics, just from some evidence from work I've done over the years. So one of the questions I've asked in my research is related to human impacts on the environment, and specifically the population components of that. So how does population impact the environment? And so this is work I've been doing in Guatemala's Maya Biosphere Reserve. It is the largest lowland tropical forest in the Americas, north of the Amazon. And since the 1990s, I've been following households, several hundred households, in this core conservation area of the Maya Biosphere Reserve, known as the Sierra de la Candona National Park. And as you can see from this composite satellite imagery, from before 1990, we see this deforestation in pink, and then since 1990, deforestation in red. This is a situation where a road was built by oil interests in the 1980s, followed by an influx of small farm families, subsistence farmers from more population dense, more areas of skewed land distribution, other parts of Guatemala. And you can see that each one of these little dots here is a farm that is dominated by corn production. But if you see in the bottom lower right-hand part of the image, we can see one very large red blotch of deforestation. That is also one household, but that household has cattle. And that, I think, is very illustrative of the difference that not just population makes, but land use choices and what predicts those land use choices among the population. So there are many factors that contribute to deforestation once these small farm families have moved to the migration frontier, the forest frontier. For the purpose of this talk, I will focus on demographic factors. So controlling for socioeconomic, institutional, and geographical factors in our multi-level hierarchical regression, larger communities of the 8 of the 28 that were in our sample were related to more agricultural expansion, more deforestation, and of the several hundred households nested within those 8 communities, higher fertility, more children was related to more agricultural expansion, more deforestation, both for supply and demand reasons, more mouths to feed, and at the same time, more labor on the farm. So that's a little bit about fertility relations to the environment. What about migration relations to the environment? So how does migration potentially impact the environment? And so looking at the same case study, if we can run our regression models and predict about 2/3 of the variation in our models. So we can predict we can explain about 2/3 of the reasons why, explaining why there's deforestation in this area, what explains the amount of it. If we step back and think for a moment, well, nobody lived here before the mid-80s, then, forget these models that show us that there's 2/3 variation in deforestation. We can explain, up to 2/3 of the variation. But think about, there's 100% correlation between why people are even here in the first place, and that is why we have deforestation here. So to get at this question of the 100% correlation that underlies any deforestation here, the presence of people, this then begs the question: who are these people? Where did they come from? Why did they move there? And there are ecological, socioeconomic, and political economic factors. For the purpose of this talk, let's focus on the demographic. Larger households with less education, and those who tended to be indigenous, for example, minorities, were more likely to move to the agricultural frontier. Much of this is likely because they had fewer opportunities elsewhere relative to other populations. And then international migration also has an impact on the environment. So this is work we did on the impact of remittances, or money sent back to households in Central America, migrants to the US, how that might impact the environment. We found, controlling for socioeconomic and other factors, that there was a significant statistical correlation between remittances sent back and investments in pasture and livestock holdings, which does not augur favorably for future conservation efforts in Latin America. This is work we did with the National Science Foundation grant, looking at deforestation in the whole continent of Latin America, from Mexico down to southern Chile and Argentina, first decade of the 2000s. We did a regression initially to connect, asking the question, what might be the connection between population change in the first decade of the 2000s and forest cover change? We have several thousand municipalities. We have many, many thousands of data points for our land use land cover change. We found a zero correlation between population and environment. But if we dig down and look at different regions, we see that in this area of South America and southern South America, there's rapid expansion of soybeans being shipped largely to Asia. And so it's population change elsewhere that's driving deforestation here, not population there. Here we see increased rainfall. It's not population, it's climate change leading to less rain some places, more rain there, leading to a greening, so a reforestation. Same here in Northeast Brazil. Whereas in Central America, and in the slopes of the Andes into the Amazon, we do see this pattern similar to what I was just showing in Guatemala, of continued population growth and poverty driving small subsistence farm households to have really little other to no choice, rather than to look for forest land where it is available, not where it's not. And increasingly, that forest land is available in conservation protected areas. So what are potential solutions? So in one paper we wrote for the Proceedings of National Academy, we found that we showed statistical evidence that improving rural healthcare reduced illegal logging among households in communities surrounding a national park in Borneo, Indonesia. These things can go together, and their solutions can also be coupled. Similarly, in a paper we published last year in Nature, which has won several awards, including the best paper from the US National Academy of Sciences, we find that agriculture and fertilizer use increases the burden of parasitic disease of schistosomiasis by fueling aquatic vegetation growth that is a habitat for the snails that transmit schistosomiasis. We did a randomized control, and where we removed that vegetation, control sites had 125% higher schistosomiasis reinfection rates. So it was lower rates where we removed the invasive vegetation. But there was vegetation was then, when it was removed, used as livestock feed and compost for crops, which ended up being a win-win for people, livelihoods, and the environment. And so we were able to demonstrate a rare, profitable win-win approach to addressing food and water access, poverty alleviation, infectious disease control, and environmental sustainability all together. And for more information, you can look at some of our work at the UC Santa Barbara website. Thank you very much. Gracias. Merci, Georgiev.
Thank you so much, Professor, for that concise presentation. So I have just one question for you because of our time. And what are some unexpected findings from your research, from your recent research as pertaining to population dynamics and land changing? Unexpected findings.
Yes, unexpected, no? Yes. Wow. Okay, so certainly an unexpected finding was that so in the Senegal work, for example, we expected that we would reintroduce native prawns or little snails to the waterways that would eat the snails that cause schistosomiasis, therefore reducing schistosomiasis infection among the populations, increasing vitality, reducing mortality and morbidity, and also providing a food source with high protein snails for the population because they eat the snails as well. We found mixed evidence for that. We were very surprised to find what we published in Nature last year, that by removing this aquatic vegetation where these snails thrive, it was a win-win-win across the board because the vegetation can be used for livestock feed, for compost, and it reduced the proliferation of the snails. That was very unexpected. And so this is the beauty of science, right? You come in with a hypothesis, you test it openly, and you're open to whatever you might find, because sometimes what you least expect actually is, you know, a more compelling and important finding than you could have imagined initially.
So we have a lot of questions here, but because of our time, we might not be able to take all of them. But there's a question in the comment section by Nkechi. Nkechi's asking, what role do demographic changes such as population play in shaping land use and development policies?
Well, they play a huge role in shaping land change and land use. And I only had a few minutes, so I couldn't go into depth about all these things, but I would just very briefly, I would characterize this as two pathways. So the first pathway is one through increasing continued population growth, and that is typically related. So we're talking about remote areas in the developing world of poor subsistence farm families. And yes, you know, our research shows that higher fertility, greater population growth is related to, not surprisingly, greater deforestation. But increasingly, we have this second pathway where population is related to forest change, but now more distantly in space and time. And that is the example I showed of the soybean expansion of Latin America. There was no correlation between local population change and deforestation for producing soybeans in South America. There is, however, a strong association between that deforestation for soybean expansion to ship those soybeans to China to feed a rapidly burgeoning urban population, which now, as they've moved out of the farms into cities, have wage labor jobs, have a little bit more money. With that money, they're investing in a diet that has more animal protein. China has very limited capacity to expand their own agriculture, very population dense in the east where there is rain, and there's desert in the west. So where do they expand their agriculture? They ship it out elsewhere, and we see that imprint then on deforestation in South America. So those are these two pathways, direct and indirect, more from poverty and population growth, as opposed to a more developed consumer-driven deforestation.
Thank you so much. This is a very interesting research, and we hope that we'll be able to invite you for more of our events and be able to expand more. Because of our time, I think this will be the end of this section. Thank you so much, Professor Lopez, for taking your time to join us despite the difference in time zone. Thank you so much. Enjoy the rest of the day.
Thank you so much for inviting me.